This is Remakes Reviews, and the premise is really obvious. Based off the title, we watch originals, remakes, and then compare the two, review the two. And this episode, we have Amanda Sonju, who I've known for years now. And if you want to maybe introduce yourself and your multi-hyphenate background.
Yeah, so I'm Amanda Sonju. I have a bachelor's degree in film and most of a master's in screenwriting, and then sort of switched tracks and working on a degree in psychology. So, you know, got to manipulate those viewers.
Yeah. I think it's really psychology and film watching or TV are so intertwined. Like you can tell when a script is done really well because you're like, oh, you are playing with like all of my emotions and tricking me at the same time.
Right.
So I think it's a great scheme you have going on. I also went to the same school as Amanda, went to Portland State University in the film program there. And now I live in New York and am sort of a filmmaker doing a variety of things. So I guess that's a good sum up of what I'm up to. And so we're going to talk about the original Secret Life of Walter Mitty from 1947 and then the remake from 2013 that had Ben Stiller, which I remember seeing years ago when it came out and enjoying. So it was nice to like go back, watch the original, rewatch the remake, and I'm really surprised by like how different they are.
Right.
And I appreciated that it wasn't just a complete remake.
I don't think we talked about it when we were first discussing this, but did you know that it was originally based on a play?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. A lot of like old Hollywood or play adaptations or book adaptations like we do now.
Yeah. My grandmother was a huge fan of Danny Kaye, who's the protagonist in the original. Mm-hmm. So like I'd seen that movie like dozens of times as a kid. And the part with the professor, it just like always cracks me up.
Yeah. It was actually, I laughed so much during it, which I wasn't expecting because sometimes I feel like the humor of older movies, because we're not living in the time to have that information be relevant, like sometimes you're like, I think it's funny, but I don't totally get it. But this one, I felt like the comedy is very timeless.
Yeah.
Like the musical numbers were just hysterical to me.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know how he sings this fast, but
I know, right?
Yeah. And to impersonate all the instruments is great.
Yeah. I was actually horrified when they said that they were going to remake The Secret Life of Walter Mitty because originally it was supposed to star Jim Carrey. And I'm like, no, God, no. Like, I do not want like a direct shot-for-shot remake with Jim Carrey. So I really appreciated the way that they did the remake, that it is really its own thing, so that I can appreciate both of them for what they are.
Let's do like a brief plot overview of the original and then the remake.
Okay.
Because I think that will help us really compare the two and how they differ. And I guess like the few places where they are aligned.
Right.
So the original one really follows Walter Mitty, a daydreamer who works at a publishing office, and he is engaged to a brunette, which I thought was amusing, but he's constantly daydreaming about a blonde in his like wacky adventure scenarios where he's an expert gambler or whatever he currently comes up with. And I think it's interesting that the plot really seems driven by Rosalind Van Horn. Like she is taking him on her journey of not getting murdered over this little black pocketbook.
Right.
And he's just kind of like along for the ride and doesn't really find himself as I expected him to by the end.
Right.
What else is there to say about it?
Yeah. Well, I think we could kind of dive into it a little bit more. I think that's a pretty good
Okay.
summary, and then when we get into like the compare contrast things, I think we could go into it a little bit better.
Yeah. Cool. So then the brief overview of the remake, do you want to tackle that one?
Sure. So for the remake in 2018, Ben Stiller.
2013.
Was it 2013?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was quite that long ago.
Yeah.
But
Time
yeah,
flies.
yeah. So the 2013 remake, Ben Stiller takes on the role of Walter Mitty. He is I don't even know what you'd actually call him. He's the person that develops the photographs for Time magazine.
Yes, I wrote it down. He was like a negatives proof something. Negative assets manager at Life.
Yeah, that was so interesting. Like I didn't even know that was really a job. But he'd been doing it for so long, and he just kind of, spaces out into these little daydreams, and his job's ending, and in order to put out the very last issue of the print edition, he has to go on this journey to find the cover photograph, and it ends up changing his life.
Right. Yep. Also, there's a love interest, but she does not drive the story nearly as much as in the original.
Right.
So one thing I thought was kind of interesting was that the daydreams in the original were so much longer. They're like full, I'm assuming 5-minute scenes, where in the remake, they're like 60 seconds maybe. Right. Some of them were like 2 minutes, but for the most part, they were like short and bite-sized. And I'm wondering if that's partly like our attention span as an audience. They're like, let's not get too deep into this because we might lose them, or if it's just the flow of the film was quicker.
I think it has to do with, I think it's a combination of both. I think it's the time period, the original versus the remake, and the fact that the original is based on the play, where, you'd have these big extravagant scene changes to his fantasies, but the fantasies don't necessarily play into what's happening in the course of the film itself. It's just more that, like, this blonde keeps reappearing. Whereas in the remake, I think that they do sort of emphasize like where he's at psychologically, and like what his desires are, and how his life at the very beginning isn't matching the life that he actually wants. And I think it propels the story in a much different way.
I think that's a really good point. We don't really know what the original Walter Mitty wants. Like, he likes coming up with stories. He seems to like his job. He's upset that his boss steals his ideas. But beyond that, like, we don't really know who is the original Walter Mitty.
Right. And that's the weird thing, is that it's never really explained. I mean, well, I take that back. It does say towards the end that he's actually an editor and a proofreader.
Right.
But
he got the promotion.
Yeah, right.
Because he needed a promotion to get married.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it kind of feels like his daydreams are in line with like he's basically trying to come up with ideas like to propel the company, because like the company itself is producing Pulp Fiction, so all of his daydreams are kind of in line with that. So I always thought he was actually a writer until I rewatched it again and saw where he's talking about he's being a proofreader.
Yeah, it makes sense that he would have been a writer, or at least like at the end have been promoted to a writer or something. Like, I don't know the hierarchy of the publishing business, but I assume writers somewhere above something.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting that he's just he's daydreaming, and the only thing that really changes at the end is that he has a different love interest and had some real life action to save a woman, the damsel in distress. So,
and he does have the the turning moment, but it's literally in the last like 3 scenes of the film. It's not
mhm,
a progression the way that it is in the remake. But again, I
right.
think it has to do with like the time period and the way that
Mhm,
like films tended to be told. I don't
mhm,
know. It really is interesting to see the change in like how storytelling evolves, because there are some films like
mhm,
Gone with the Wind where, it follows a character and you see, well, actually, no, because she, like, even in Gone with the Wind, she doesn't really change all that much until the very, very end of the film. It's just more following like a series
mhm,
of mistakes, and you think that they're never going to change, and then at the very end, it's like boom, it happens. Whereas now, it's more
mhm,
like you have to like push the character to change in every single scene so that it's not such a,
mhm.
surprise ending.
Right. Yeah, that we're like, "Why would they have done that? They didn't show us anything that indicated that they would." But I really liked how the remake was done. When I originally saw it, I was like thinking back. I was like, all I remember is that it's a story of like this whimsical man who goes on an adventure, and that's the extent to which I remembered it. And I was kind of curious if Ben Stiller was still going to be enjoyable for me rewatching it, and I was pleasantly surprised to find I still liked it. That it wasn't like
Yeah.
a meet the parents type humor.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's kind of what I was going into it expecting. I was expecting it to be a direct remake and
Right.
didn't expect to connect with it so viscerally as I did, because
Mm-hmm.
I just like I feel like I am Walter Mitty in so many ways. Like there's just you know, like when things aren't really what you wanted it to be at the beginning of
Mm-hmm.
like your adulthood, it's really kind of easy to fall into that like daydream trap where you're pretending that things are better than they actually are. And like that's
Right.
probably a commentary on the way that life is now, with Instagram
Mm-hmm.
and Facebook and, putting this
Right.
perfect self of you out there, but it's not the person that actually exists. But I liked
Yeah.
he got yeah, I like that he got physically pulled out of that, to see it for what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And as he starts growing, the daydreams start disappearing, and I thought that that was so profound.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that doesn't happen in the
Yeah.
original. Like he's still, he's still like
Mm-hmm.
daydreaming and pretending to be this big tough dude in order to finish what he needs to finish to
Right.
save the girl. Whereas, Ben Stiller
Mm-hmm.
he's again physically pulled out of his original reality, because he has to find this photograph, and then when he gets there it's not where he thought it was supposed to be, and like his
Mm-hmm.
entire outlook on life has changed and he didn't need to go anywhere at all. Sorry, spoiler alert, I should have said that
Right.
before.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hope people understand that we are going to spoil both movies entirely, or else we won't be able to talk about them. Um, I thought it was really exciting how early on his adventurous spirit took over. I really didn't expect it to happen in like the first 30 minutes. I thought there would be more like daydreaming. Should I? Let me worry, because the original, he's like he overthinks a lot of things and just kind of like listens to his mom and his boss and is just kind of like pulled all around town by the love interest too. He's not really being an active participant himself. So it was interesting to see like Ben Stiller's version where he is like, oh, well, I want to finish what I started. This photographer really respects me. So off I go to Greenland to find this guy and the
Right.
missing photograph. So that was cool. And I think it also shows us more of who he is, that he is like, well, I have nothing to lose. So I'll take this opportunity to pursue at least one of my dreams.
Right.
Yeah,
And I
very
think that
cool.
is one place where the film, the original and the remake, have something in common, where their lives are really unbearable as is, and they sort of fall back into their daydreams to get through it. And then, even though it happens so much later in the original, they do have to like come into reality and like change what's happening in their life and get rid of all of the crappy things that they're like trying to survive in order to, become the full person that they need to be.
It is probably very stereotypical of movies from the 1930s and 40s and maybe even the 50s, where there's like a very clear villain,
Right.
who is like the boot,
Right.
where in the remake it was more like his like stagnation was the villain.
Right.
And I think it was cool because it's not as if, I'm fighting a bad guy. It's like I'm fighting the stuck version of myself.
Yeah.
Which I guess is why it's so relatable.
Right. Yeah.
What did you like better about the original versus the remake?
It's really hard for me to say that I liked something better or worse because in my mind they're two different movies, even though they have
really
the
are,
same kind of through line. Like they don't feel like a direct remake, like the live action Aladdin. You know what I mean? Where it's like, yeah. So
basically shot for shot, yeah.
Right, yeah. Like, if you're gonna do a remake, do something like this. Like, make it stand on its own. Like, pay homage to like the things that people love about it, but don't get bogged down in trying to, bring it into the 21st century. You know what I mean? So
Right.
some of the things that I still loved watching it again were like just Danny Kaye being over the top without really being over the top. It just like he just hits that funny bone. It's just so ridiculous and silly, and it's so impressive at the same time. Like you're saying, where he sings really, really fast. And there's this one dream sequence where it actually doesn't feature the girl so much, and I don't think it actually, if I remember right, I don't think that it actually happens in the play. I think it was specifically something that he did, and they kept it in for Danny Kaye. But it's the sequence where he starts off as a British Royal Air Force pilot, big famous.
She does make an appearance.
Yes, she does, but it's not as heavy as the other ones.
She's not the main focal point. Yeah,
exactly. And
that whole daydream, that was so good.
I know, right? Because he's like supposed to be this big tough guy, and then they goad him into mimicking a music professor, and he goes off on this whole spiel, and he's like mocking classical music at the same time he's telling a story without really telling a story, and speaking gibberish at one point, and you're still able to understand what's happening.
Yeah,
it's just that's
the trumpets, the violins. Yeah,
I know, right?
It was great.
The oboe.
That was such a
Where
good
is this
scene.
raspberry?
I really, when he's like, right? I really found it comical that his sound effect came up constantly, the tapakada.
Uh-huh. And that is
I didn't expect it to have such a through line.
And that is something that happens in the play, and I've always kind of wondered, like, is there supposed to be something more to it that I'm not getting, because it's not like it's not my time period or what. I don't know what it is, but
Right.
I've never quite understood why that was a focal point, because it really is every single one of his daydreams, and you don't ever really find out why.
Mm-hmm.
So
No. Yeah, it's like it's a sound effect of a medical instrument. It's a sound effect of an airplane. It's just it's every sound effect.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I really love the slapstick of the original, and just watching Danny Kaye like coming through his boss's window twice and knocking over that man in the chair twice. I was howling. It was so funny to me.
Right?
Yeah, his timing is really good for that.
Yeah. And did you notice that the bad guy that was trying to throw him out of the office was Boris Karloff?
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I was like, he looks familiar. Maybe it's just because he kind of looks like Frankenstein. I didn't really think like, oh, it's Boris Karloff.
Right.
Yeah. But it's a good movie. And then the remake, what did I really like? Let's see. I think just that, unlike a lot of films where it feels like there's more outward motivation, it felt like he was really internally motivated, and it was still a little funny, but it was funny in different ways.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was more just like incidental humor rather than like slapstick.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my favorites is just the subtlety of it. Like it, like the original is very over the top, and it's because of the It's because Danny Kaye is the protagonist, and like we said before,
he
like
is an over the top character,
right? I was kind of expecting it to be that again, but it really isn't. Like there's this gentle sort of he fantasizes about Kirsten Wiig's character, who's the love interest in this one. And she, like, it's clear that she likes him. Like, I love that line. I liked it from the trailer, but I like it in the context of the film where he's talking to her and he goes off into a daydream about her, and she's still talking. And then at one point, she's like, "Where do you go?" Like, she notices, like, that part of him, whereas a lot of people don't. I don't want to say nobody notices him. Like everybody just kind of like brushes it off. Like that's just a facet of who he is, and doesn't really like he's kind of forgettable for the most part around where he works, and particularly for the new dude who's taking over. And the two people that focus most on him are are the love interest and the photographer. Which is why it makes like him finding the picture itself so huge, at least for me. But yeah, it kind of goes back to everything is like he keeps it so internal, and everything about the film is internal. So like even as he starts to come out of it, he starts to see like, what's the fantasy in this relationship and what do I actually need to do to create a relationship with this person? So it's just complete and total growth, and you're seeing it like in the context of this one person instead of like the outward, like watching the whole thing as a play. You know what I mean? Like it just, I don't know if I'm making like sense of what I'm saying. It just, that.
Well, people will have to watch it and they'll go, oh yeah, now I know. One other thing that I thought was really cool. Did I just lose my thought? Oh, yes. So another difference that I thought was really interesting was how in the original, so Danny Kaye's version, he seems really kind of like hopeless and clumsy. And his only real skill as we see it is like these entrepreneurial ideas for his publishing company, but we only see that I think 2 or 3 times, where in the remake, like he can skateboard, he can do these random things. He's not like lost when it comes to directions. He has innate skills, or skills that he had when he was younger that he just kind of stopped utilizing. And I thought that was nice that he is already a person.
Mm-hmm.
He's not like a facade, I guess, to a certain extent.
Right. Yeah. He's not a caricature.
Right. He's a character.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I also really liked that in the remake, aside from the little daydreams, there was an element of whimsy through like text messages and how they showed the letter writing or the notes that they're reading. I thought that was a nice way to incorporate some whimsy that we weren't really getting. Where the first one, like we had so much whimsy because his daydreams were so fantastical.
Right.
So I thought that was a nice way to kind of like keep that element in.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I appreciate that they just did sort of little nods to things, but not necessarily like I keep harping on it because it just feels so important to me that it just is not a direct remake. It's allowed to stand on its own, and you're allowed to love both of them equally. Like, you know what I mean? It happens so rarely in Hollywood that remakes happen like this, where where somebody's allowed to just have freedom with it and enjoy something, and take elements that they enjoy and still make it their own.
I wonder if that's partly because the movie is from 1947 and they're remaking it like 60-plus years, 60-ish years later, where we tend to see remakes now that are like every 5 years, and they're all kind of the same formula. So I wonder if that's a part of it, or if it's that like the screenwriting and production company, if they were just committed to like adapting it and not just remaking it. But I don't know what the answer would be.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting to kind of go through and do a little bit of Google searching.
Yeah. Sometimes I try and then I'm not finding the answers that I want, so I will just skedaddle.
Right.
I'm going to see if there's anything else that I wanted to bring up. Oh, yeah. I really like Patton Oswalt's character of Todd from eHarmony and how he would call him really just to check in and chit chat as if they became fast friends. I like that. I thought
it is just a great sort of touchstone where, and again, it kind of goes back to the subtlety thing where everything's so internalized. It gives him someone to be the like the idiot in the world that you can explain things to, if that makes sense. Like, but it's in such a heartfelt way. You know, it's it's one of those things that kind of subverts everything. Like you're not really expecting this relationship to come up, you know?
Right. Yeah, I thought it'd be, a one-time phone call, a little comedy, and then that's it. But it almost seemed like each time Todd called, there was like a different development in his character. Like the first phone call, he hasn't gone anywhere. The second one, he's in the midst of his journey. I think the third one, he was in the midst of his second part of the journey. And then lastly, we see him in person at the airport, which I also was surprised by. I thought he was just going to be like a voice in the abyss the whole time. But then we got to see him. It was great. That was a nice touch.
And a personification of him being pulled out of like his former life. Because before he was so introverted, and so, I mean, he probably still is introverted. He's still kind of shy, but a little bit more accepting of who he is at the end. And yeah, having him tell him that, the entire office has been like listening to this so excitedly, because it kind of shows like what we're feeling as an audience, like connecting with this person who kind of has a sucky life at the beginning. Not really sucky, just kind of unadventurous and not really what
generic
they for their life.
Mm-hmm.
So he's getting really excited about this journey the same way we are as an audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was really nice. And it's funny to hear like the updates of his account where
Uh-huh.
when he's gone nowhere, nobody likes him. And when he's gone all these places, suddenly he's getting fast attention.
Right.
If you travel, women will like you too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was kind of cute the way the Clementine pie was another kind of like connection throughout the film, the remake of the film. It's not a pie I've ever heard of before, but
Yeah.
here it was like he brings it to the office. He finds it on this ship between Greenland and Iceland. He takes it to Afghanistan so that he can eventually
Right.
go to the Himalayas. It's like, okay.
Uh-huh.
I think it's really nice when movies do that where you're like, oh, okay, here's an element I recognize immediately.
Right.
And now I want to try some.
Yeah, they need to put out his mom's recipe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you know what's funny to me is like in the original, when I first saw the Rosalind Van Horn character, I was like, she really reminds me of Christina Applegate. Like my
Oh
brain
yeah.
was like, if she was in the remake, I would not have been mad because I'd be like, yep, I see it. But I love Kristen Wiig too, so
Yeah.
I'm not complaining. But I just thought like, wow, they look alike from my perspective.
Yeah.
If I look up a photo, I hope I'm not like, wow, I cannot see.
Well, now that you say that, now it's going to be something I can't unsee. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts on either film?
I don't think so. I think I kind of touched on everything that grabbed me anyway.
Yeah, I think me too. I think it's nice to watch older films and everything's like made on a stage, which I think is really nice. I definitely appreciate the art that's in the original,
Oh
probably
yeah.
more than the remake, because the remake looks like a lot of it's shot on location. So it's nice to see like how elaborate these sets are, the wardrobe, color schemes,
Right.
the props.
I
It's
don't know.
nice.
Thinking about it, like the way that you're describing it, that really kind of both things feed into both films. Like you've got like everything on the set is so elaborate and so put together. It feeds into how his daydreams are, because everything's staged versus like the remake, and like that movie would not have had the same impact, I think, that if it wasn't shot on location, like if there wasn't like
It would
these
feel, I think, stiff.
sweeping views. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. To show how grand his adventure is.
Right.
The first daydream really cracked me up because I was like, what is he hearing that has him like stopping on the subway platform? And then he basically turned into Spider-Man.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But yeah, I guess like the only other thing I have to say is watch both if you haven't, because they're both enjoyable for different reasons. And it won't feel, as we've said many times, it won't feel like you're watching an exact remake. It will feel like a standalone film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, I think it's important to watch some of the older films just because I think they get a bad rap. Like they have a different purpose, and they have a different energy, and the artistry and the musicianship and the dance and things that have fallen to the wayside in our era of film. So it's really nice to just go back and appreciate the work that went into some of these original movies, particularly post-war era. When everything got so extravagant.
I was going to say it's like 2 years after World War II.
Right.
That this one came out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some post-war joy.
Right. I think they call it the golden age of Hollywood for a reason. But I mean, it was also like in the middle of like the contractual stuff, and like basically if you wanted to be a superstar, you would sell your soul to the studio itself and, you know, make whatever they wanted to make whenever they wanted to make it. And you were,
crank out some movies.
Yeah. But, you know, they all.
Yeah, the power of the studio system.
Right. But I mean, they could get stuff done in a way that can't really be done anymore because it was all in house, and you know, they could all focus all of that energy on one thing, and one person was running the helm, and you know, you didn't have a lot of infighting.
Yeah. Very, very structured. Just crank things out.
Mm-hmm.
But some of it's really good. Some of it's
yeah.
Like now, you know, some of these Hollywood films are pretty good. And some you're like, okay, I don't know why you made that for millions of dollars. Yeah, I guess that's it. Like, do you want people to find you on Instagram?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram or Twitter under Waking Daydreams. That's me.
Yeah, that's you. Cool, and good luck on your program.
Thank you. Yes. And, you know, good luck on your many, 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 many projects.
Thank you.